So today's video will be about my first ever car. That's right, shortly after I got my license, I wanted to talk with you guys about the interesting first vehicle that I had and all the weird quirks and little gremlins that came with owning said vehicle. A lot of you probably can identify with this experience, but if not, it's still a pretty funny story and something to be shared and listened to, hopefully, if you have the attention span. So let's rewind back to the year 2009. When I was just graduating high school. Wait a minute, hold up, it's crazy to even think that much time has passed since I even graduated high school. Man, I'm old, which is not a bad thing, but it ain't pretty. Physically, when you start to develop aches and pains, you losing your vision and you start caring about your diet and the 6 o'clock ABC News. Here's my favorite. Nothing makes me feel more old than losing my hair on the top of my head. It's so weird. Think about it. As you grow older, you begin to develop hair in all these weird places. But the place where it arguably matters the most, it slowly fades away. When you're a man, that is, depending on your genes. Can you say male pattern baldness? Whoa, hit the brakes. I went off on a long tangent there. Now back to the topic at hand. My first ever car, my first ever set of wheels, my first ever whip, more like beater. Darn. Come on guys, it wasn't that bad. Tell them the story and they'd probably say that John was. Anyways, it was the year 2009 and this was a very special year for me because a lot of things began to change, such as I started becoming a lot more serious about my art and drawing. I also began to become more interested in learning different ways of hip-hop dancing, which in relation to that, King of Pop had just passed away. The infamous Michael Jackson, unfortunately, and I had just recently gotten my license and a car at some point thereafter. Now, unless you're like 40 and above, I can bet you that you didn't have a car like mine for your first one. I mean, I've seen a number of my peers or of my generation and the one after me receive some amazing, practically brand new cars with their first set of wheels. Which is kind of crazy. This completely befuddles me. I mean, you'd think that for a brand new driver, you'd want to get your child a car that's relatively older or at least rough around the edges, beat up, dent here and there, practically a hooped in some way because you're anticipating them to make some mistakes. I mean, of course, you don't want your child or family member to die or anything, but they might sideswipe somebody else's car or back into a pole or something, in which case, with set expectations, you're going to buy said new driver something old or jacked up, but still reliable. You're not going to want to drop a crap load of money on a Lambo or something crazy over the top fancy and fast because that car will most likely end up in the ditch or hoop-defied, if you know what I mean. That being said, my car definitely checked all the boxes on the beater, hoop-defied, lemon list of criteria because in the year of 2009, I was gifted the 1987 Pontiac Grand Am. Kodak moment, give him the day one. Put up that picture. Yep, that's right. Hey, yo! All you millennials driving 2010 Chargers and fresh off the line Audis for first whips, let that set in. Now, despite its age, at the time, this car had suspiciously low mileage, 60,000 miles for a 22-year-old car? That's crazy. And drove like a dream with little to no issues, so it was a blessing. But there were an ever-increasing and maybe even life-threatening list of cons. Get out your CVS receipts because that's the only way you're going to be able to get all of this on a reasonably sized piece of paper. You ready?
One.
The back window couldn't go down and was held up by a crowbar, which, if removed, would cause the window to fall completely into the door. Because of this, when I locked myself out of the car, which I did very often, I would, as discreetly as I could, push the window down to unlock my car doors manually to gain access to my car once again. Talk about a master car thief. Dominic Toretto ain't got nothing on me. Yeah, but serious. As a young black male, that's not something you want to get caught doing in public, if you know what I mean.
Need some help?
You asking me if I need some help or if
if I'm still in this car.
Oh, and eventually the driver's side door stopped going down all the way too. I mean, it started stopping less than half the way down like a Lamborghini Countach, except for it wasn't cool. It wasn't as cool as the Lambo's windows were, especially when it's hot out and, you know, no pun intended. And when I want to go through the Chick-fil-A drive-thru for my chicken sandwich, you can hardly get the back to the window. But I mean, people are crazy anyway for going to Chick-fil-A when the line wraps around the whole building. Like that's crazy. Anyway, on to number 2. This car was so old, the tires weren't being manufactured anymore. I mean, they were obsolete. The same way wind-up disposable cameras and cassette tapes were. And this is where things got a little dangerous and life-threatening, because since my tires were no longer being manufactured, I had to always buy them used. They were never available new, at least not anymore. Being that they were always used, who knows what kind of condition they were in once I purchased them, and who knows how old they were, since they were an old obsolete tire size. It was my experience, many times over, that the tires I bought were always dry rotted or pretty much close to being completely used up, and this put me at a risk of high-speed highway blowouts and flat tires. And that's crazy. I had to change the tires on this car so much that they could have put me on a NASCAR pit stop maintenance team. That's just how good I became at it. And then again, now that I think about it, the whole tire issue could have been due in part to the alignment being so bad, because the car could never drive in a complete straight line for as long as I can remember. That is, when you let go of the steering wheel. Driving with an alignment this bad would cause uneven wear and tear on your tire, and my car would often develop a wobbly steering wheel syndrome, which would often later on result in an absolute tire blowout. You know, that's really bad on the highway. I probably went through a couple tires within a 1 or 2 year period because they were always falling apart. I remember shortly after I got the car that I decided I was going to take me and my friends out for a nice night at the mall and the movies. Here I was, thinking I was Mr. Cool Guy because I was one of the first to get their first car. However, on my way home, I was probably going about 50 to 60 miles per hour, and the steering wheel was wobbling very violently. And side note, the car would often do this at highway speeds, and because of this, I became very frightened of driving on the highway. I was never relaxed, and I was always expecting a tire blowout whenever I would hit the expressway or the boulevard because of what happened this one and the first time I was out with my friends. But back to what happened with them. The steering wheel was wobbling violently, and the car was shaking. I felt something bad was going to happen, and surely enough it did. The tire tread began to rip away from the tire itself, making a loud grinding noise. And this scared the heck out of me, and I immediately pulled over. I was so very embarrassed, but it was a very humbling experience. That's what you want to call it, more so embarrassing. But anyway, one of the many perks of driving around on obsolete tires that are pretty much dry rotted. Yeah, you don't want to do this. Now, as for the list of the other interesting quirks that came with my 1987 Grand Am, I'll just give you a quick glance over what they were, because I want to get to the more meatier and more comedic developments pertaining to this car. And this list goes as follows. Whenever it rained, the inside of the car would flood. Now, I don't know if any of you guys know much about floor pans and vehicles, but whenever water gets inside of a car and it floods, the floor pans can rust out, and this is horrible. With a capital H. Horrible. It can be unsafe and a very expensive fix. Another quirk, the radio in this car was awesome, but whenever it was hot outside, for some strange and odd reason, the radio would die for a random couple of seconds and then reboot itself. Now, while this may not seem like all that big of an issue, it can certainly be embarrassing for someone who likes to blast their music in traffic. I mean, here you are driving along in traffic and you come to a red light and you're just bobbing your head to your Michael Jackson, you know, Billie Jean, I love. When all of a sudden your car goes completely silent and you look like a total idiot as you continue to bob your head along to the random silence, and you look like a total idiot as you continue to sing a song that has just been abruptly cut for some unknown electrical reason. It wasn't bad, but it was embarrassing, to say the least, not to mention the fact that the car eventually developed a short in the battery terminals, which would also result in the entirety of the car shutting off in live drive traffic at a stoplight at any given time, you would have to get out of the car and wiggle around and play around with the terminal connections to your battery until this car decided it wanted to start again. And once again, not terrible, but still humbling, very humbling, more so embarrassing. Now, because of all these quirks and little hiccups as mentioned in the list, my car ran into somewhat of an issue with getting its yearly state inspection certified and passed because it didn't meet certain safety and emission requirements. Not only that, but my car was so old that I couldn't even have it inspected at just any old shop. I had to have a special kind of safety inspection for my car because it was made before the year 1996, and it thus ran on an ancient form of diagnostics known as OBD1. Also obsolete. This was a headache because I'd often have to jump through hoops and pay extra money to keep my car, quote unquote, legal to drive on a yearly basis. Whether this meant buying new, used tires or putting down money on some repair that specific mechanic thinks I needed to pass that time around. Now, I said quote unquote legal for this reason, because when it comes to automotive annual state inspections, it's such a gray area. I mean, it's gray, it's contradictory, and it's almost, I would say, even completely unnecessary to have. And what I mean by gray is that here in PA, in Pennsylvania, we have this so-called yearly inspection that you need to keep your car legally roadworthy. Whilst there are other states that actually don't even have them. They don't have them. Like, are you serious? Are you kidding me right now? No. Your car could be worse than Mickey Mouse's banged up bucket of bolts. Speaking of which, my friend would often say that my car was held together by paper clips and rubber bands. But it wasn't that bad. Anyway, your car could be worse than Mickey Mouse's banged up bucket of bolts that hardly makes it a mile without consistent misfires, and it still will be okay to drive there, but not in Pennsylvania. On top of this, I've seen mechanics use the state inspections as a means to make money and as a cash grab, because it's a legal obligation for you to get your car updated with these shiny stickers placed on your windshield. I mean, you could actually drive into some sleazy old mechanic shop with absolutely nothing wrong with your car, looking to have your inspection updated, but just because that mechanic hadn't made enough on oil changes and tire rotations that week, he decides you need a new muffler, tires, and brake lines to pass. That's right. And here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. Here's the cream of the crop, and here's the icing on the cake of this money laundering scheme. He tells you that after he's inspected your car, you failed. You know what this means? Despite failing, you still gotta pay the full price of $60 for this inspection and any repairs he thinks you need. Now, this happened to me several times. That being said, you can definitely take your car to another shop where you will hopefully pass inspection, but you would still need to cough up another $60 or so for another full-blown inspection. Yep, that's how it is in Pennsylvania. Now, there was a time where I got so sick of this that I didn't even bother to have my inspection done. I literally somehow drove around for months with inspired inspection stickers until one day, hello, sir. How are you today? I couldn't help but notice you're driving around with an expired inspection. Yeah, sorry about that. I was actually going to get that fixed. Well, typically, sir. I wouldn't even care about this sort of thing. But your stickers are like 3 months past due, bruh. I'm going to have to ticket you, sir. Please sit tight, sir. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back with your citation. So I sat and waited for a good minute, and then the cop reemerges with a citation for over $300. Bro, my brother was floored. $300. Now, fortunately, the police officer was nice enough to inform me that I could have the ticket erased and my money returned if I were to get my inspection update and prove it in court. And I did exactly that. Fortunately, I was able to find a no bull crap mechanic who was able to get my stickers updated without any hassle or financial harm. And they really hooked it right up. They would give me a quick glance over, and even if something was wrong, they would just say that I could have it fixed if I wanted. wanted to. And did I get it fixed? No, I did not, because I was broke at the time driving this 1987 Pontiac. Now, they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to do it. They still did it, and it was awesome. So I was happy because, can you imagine saving $300? You know, can you imagine that? Anyway, but I still had to go through the whole headache of going to court. Something as simple as driving an old car that had a bunch of little nonsense issues. Yeah. Now, despite all the trouble this car caused me, it still lasted me well over 6 years on the road and through college, which was a blessing. It was awesome. You know, thank God for that. And more than anyone could ask for in a beater as bad as mine. Even though I did say multiple times throughout this video that it wasn't that bad. But I have yet to mention the one fatal issue that developed, which saw the car ultimately being sent to the junkyard after so many long years of self-esteem crushing, self-deprecating fun. Being that this was my first car, I wasn't the best with keeping up on things such as maintenance and checking fluid levels, which probably resulted in the car's eventual overheating issue. That's what it is. Which is very, very, very bad. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about a car overheating, but it's a very dangerous thing. You would never ever want to happen to your car because it can result in a blown head gasket, oil and fluid leaks, and probably even an engine bay fire. Okay, so my car with the overheating issue developed a gigantic hole in the radiator, which meant it was constantly losing cooling fluid, which then meant my commute times were limited and I only had about 45 minutes, if that, to get from point A to point B before I would inevitably overheat and have to pull over to refill the radiator with water. Crazy! This hole in the radiator and overheating also meant that I had to literally fill the radiator with a gallon of water every morning before I drove the car or whenever I had it parked for an extended period of time. Hot outside? Yep. Fill her up. Sub-zero temperatures outside or blizzard? Yep. Fill her up. Pouring rain and thunderstorm? Yep. Fill her up. Tornado or hurricane and I'm trying to make a quick getaway? Yep. Fill her up. Somebody chasing me, trying to kill me. I need to get to my beater, overheated car, safety getaway. Yep. Fill her up. In all these situations, I would have to pop the trunk, get out of the car, and get one of my many gallons of water that I carried all the time on me in the trunk as if I was going on some desert voyage. Then pop the hood, open the radiator cap, and pour it in until it overflows. After which, I can start it up and set a mental timer for, you got it, 45, maybe 40 minutes, if that, before I had to pull over and fill up again. Yep, it was that bad. The hole was that big. Not to mention I had the same issue with the power steering fluid, and like I said, it resulted in the car's ultimate demise because it would overheat again and again and again to the point where it would completely wreck the ignition system, which meant in turn that the car would refuse to start most times, would randomly cut off mid-commute whenever it did start. So yeah. Ah, the memories. See, while bittersweet, it was still a very, very humbling and good experience. And why is that? Because I learned a lot of things about owning and taking care of a car that actually went on to help me later take better care of the cars I would purchase later on in life. And in fact, I eventually became a car enthusiast. So I guess that's the moral of the story, is that despite and regardless of what, downsides or cons you may run into owning a car or doing this or that in life, there's always something to be learned. Something to be taken away that will, I guess, help build you up later on in life. So I hope you enjoyed this.